Hi everybody, welcome to FedTrends. Starting a new series about ISO standards and implementing ISO standards in a way that will both benefit your organization and also not frustrate everybody when they are operating in the ISO environment. There are a lot of consultants you can use to put an ISO system in place and get certified, but they have to ask you questions, and if you don't have answers, you can end up with something that is administratively annoying and frustrating for everybody. Quick side note before we jump into our first ISO standard, take a minute to subscribe to the video. That'll make sure that you have a chance to know when we put new content up. All right, let's dive into ISO 9001. Now, ISO 9001 is a general quality standard. That's the foundation of quality systems. And overall, you can get started by getting a copy of the standard. You go to the ISO website, it's a couple $100 to get a copy of it and download it. But here's what you're going to find when you read it. There are 368 things that you have to do in ISO 9001. They're called shall statements. Anytime the word shall exists in the document, that's something that you have to show in your organization. But if you go through and just read those 368 things you have to do, it's kind of like putting a puzzle together without ever having the big picture on the box to know what you're doing. So let me give you some context. First off, key concepts. There are two big concepts in ISO 9001 that you want to know. One is plan, do, check, act. That just says you're going to have a plan for something, then when you do it, you're going to check to see how it went, and then based on how you should improve it, you're going to act to improve whatever service you just delivered. The other concept is risk, that you should be monitoring risks and talking about what things could go wrong and what are we going to do to try to avoid it happening, and if it happens, how are we going to fix it or how are we going to react? Those are your main concepts from a big picture standpoint. Now, there are other things that you need to consider. Number one is scope. You got to decide, is ISO 9001 going to be a part of the whole organization or just a project? It's easiest to put it across the entire organization because that doesn't mean everything in your organization has to be ISO compliant. It means you have the entire organization to go find an example of where you're doing a thing. Another key concept of ISO is leadership engagement. ISO wants to know that the work that's being done is being watched and paid attention to by somebody. So that's where those ideas of continuous improvement and risk and reviewing the daily work and strategically improving the quality over time, that's where that all comes in. Then there are some things, you need to have some policy documents, you need to do risk management, you need to manage change and records in the environment, you need to have some metrics to measure things, you need to do internal audits, you need communication and training on your quality system, and then if you have an error, what they call non-conforming product, you have to document that and figure out what went wrong. Those are the key topics, but if you're going to implement it, you only really need to look at 4 major buckets or 4 major categories of all of that I just talked about. The first is knowledge management. You're going to have some place where you put all this information. You need a place to keep things. You need a list of what policies and procedures you've written so that you know what you need to review, and if you were going to send people to go read the policies, what you've written. And then you need guidance on who can approve what and how they're going to change it, and when you change something, how you're going to communicate and then teach people what the change was. That's pretty simple and straightforward. There's a whole bunch of words in the ISO standard that boil down to that, but if you come up for what you want your strategy to be for knowledge management, then when the consultant says they're going to go write a bunch of documents to become ISO compliant, that's fine, but the strategy for your knowledge management, where do I want to keep stuff, and who is allowed to make changes, and how am I going to communicate it, that's topic 1. Topic 2, you need to have some kind of delivery or program review. If you're delivering services, you want to make sure that you are actually paying attention to the quality of those services, and you want to know that your customers are happy with what you're doing and that you have metrics to support that you are being successful. Now, the metrics can be whatever you want. They can be tied to financials. They can be tied to customer satisfaction. They can be tied to software releases or how many bugs you found or how many laptops you were able to provision in a given amount of time. That doesn't matter. Most things in ISO standards, and one of the reasons I'm an advocate for them, is they're not prescriptive. They're not going to tell you you have to track something. They're going to ask you what's important to you, and then you can track that. One of the places people fall into problems with consultants is they'll ask that question, and if you don't have an answer, they're going to arbitrarily pick something. So it's not ISO's fault. It's the gap between understanding what's necessary and what's important, for your organization, the kind of work that you're doing. Now, the delivery reviews also help give you a place that when you have projects that you're delivering, you can talk about risks and mitigations. You can talk about if there's ever an issue that occurs, how you're going to fix it, and document that. So having defined reviews about the work that you're doing is important. You can call them delivery reviews, call them program reviews, come up with your own term, but that's important from an ISO standpoint. The next, strategic reviews. All this says is about once a year, if not, you can do it more if you want to, you should really be sitting and taking a step back with your leadership team and saying the things that we're doing, are they working or not? That's it. The details of what form and what artifact, none of that's really important. It's that you've said you're going to do knowledge management and keep some documents and train people and decide who can change things, and you're going to review how you're delivering services. Are those two things working correctly? That's what the strategic reviews need to be. And the last one is internal audits. All that says is, you said you're doing knowledge management, you said you're doing delivery reviews, you said you're having a strategic review at some frequency. Did those things actually happen? That's it. There's 4 main concepts. There might be 368 different things you have to do to be ISO 9001 compliant. You need to have 4 key ideas of how you're going to integrate that into your business, and there's real value. I will tell you that if you implement it, you'll see continuous improvement year over year, and there'll be benefit, and it doesn't have to be in everybody's way. I've implemented them a lot of times, and it does help an organization run better. Those are my tips on how to implement ISO 9001. Stay tuned for more ISO videos. Thank you so much for watching FedTrends. See you next time.